on to our third of four major demands. We demand that there be an increase in the representation and leadership opportunities for marginalized and frontline communities on the Maine Climate Council, and that all stakeholders are involved in its discussions and decision-making processes. Speaking to this, we have Sirohi Kumar. She uses she, her pronouns, and she is a Bar Harbor resident and a sophomore at MDI High School.
Historically, there has always been inequality when it comes to climate change. When ecosystems are ruined and species die out, the people who ordered the destruction are always safe from the consequences of their decisions. When factories pumped out smog to pollute the air and dumped chemicals in the rivers to poison the water, it was never the people who were profiting that suffered. Instead, people of color and people living in poverty, who are often forced to live in the least desirable neighborhoods where the polluted air and water are felt the most strongly, are disproportionately affected. Everyday citizens who had no input into the decisions and conversations that shaped their lives. Even now, as we reach the precipice before the inevitable fall that the climate crisis has brought upon us, the decisions made to fight it are being made by the same demographic of people as those who have always failed to do so in the past. This lack of representation in viewpoint, station, and a host of other factors is unacceptable and must not continue on the Maine Climate Council. There is a term that is frequently used to describe the actions that must be taken to ensure a just and equitable transition from fossil fuels to a zero-emission economy: climate justice. But what does this so-called climate justice mean? It means ensuring that the people who are affected most by the climate crisis have a voice in the decision-making and have the opportunity to draw attention to the issues they experience that are not apparent to the current leadership. Climate justice means directly addressing the way that the climate crisis deepens the injuries of poverty and racism through policy decisions that include all voices. This can be done by passing bills similar to the one passed in New York as part of the Climate Community Protection Act, which mandated that 40% of the state's climate investment go to disadvantaged communities, based on a review of equity policies around the country. In directly acknowledging the classist impact that the climate crisis has, the state of New York took the first step in addressing past injustices, and it is essential that all these past wrongs be righted as we take steps to achieve a future based in justice for all. With this in mind, it is important that we create opportunities for people of color, Indigenous people, immigrants, people who are working class, impoverished, homeless, rural, differently abled, and more, to come to the table and bring attention to the injustice they will face disproportionately due to the climate crisis. We refuse to allow people who do not represent the masses to make decisions that impact and influence our lives. We demand that there be an increase in the representation and leadership opportunities for marginalized and frontline communities on the Maine Climate Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Sirohi. Thank you. Sophie is the last of our speakers, and that was the last of our four major demands. If you would like to see each of the demands has more written out into it, we only kind of gave a synopsis. The demands and other suggestions are available on the 350 website. So feel free to go look them up and read a little deeper into them. As for now, we're going to do some questions. So what we're going to do for 5 or so minutes, if anybody has a question, they are welcome to ask it to any of the speakers or anyone else organizing. And then after we go through a couple questions like that, we'll kind of disband and mingle. You can mingle among themselves, and also press are welcome to pull people aside, interview, talk to people, so on and so forth. But so if anybody has any general questions, feel free to ask them now, and someone can speak to them.
Maybe for Sirohi, is it? Maybe you could step up. My name's Fred Bever. I'm from Maine Public Radio. Can you repeat what the particular demand was that you talked about was?
Yes, so the demand was that there be more representation on the Maine Climate Council for marginalized and frontline communities for all decision-making processes.
So is that based on an examination of the membership of the council, if there's a lack of diversity?
Yes.
Basically too many white faces, there are Anglo-Saxon, what's the concern, how do you explore it, how do you try to promote those kinds of members to the council?
Well, climate change and the climate crisis is an issue that impacts people, not just of different races disproportionately, but also people of different positions in life socioeconomically. And the youth feel that there isn't enough representation of both racial diversity and of diversity in station. So if we have the same people who are making the decisions that cause the climate crisis to be as bad as it is, making the decisions to fight it, then we feel that there aren't going to be appropriate solutions.